It's quite a short session today, so let's actually dive straight in. Just to introduce the folks on the call we have from Iru, I'm Ryan, I have Jim, and there's also Maz joining alongside us to man the Q&A section. So yeah, if you've got any questions, feel free to drop them in. We're happy to answer them, but there will be a short Q&A at the end of the session as well, just in case we need to scoop any of them up that we couldn't answer, or maybe just answer live. But today we want to focus on blueprint routing. Now, depending on which side of the Atlantic you're on, it's routing. I say routing, Jim says routing, so it doesn't really matter. It's just a colloquialism. But from our perspective, we really wanted to introduce maybe the why and what's actually been released since this feature came live. If anyone's had any hands on it already, that's great. Would love to know your thoughts and share feedback with us, as always. But just to kick off today, we really just wanted to take the flexibility that we've built into the blueprint model with assignment maps a step further. If you think about the blueprint model in Iru, it's really about defining which library items and what needs to be scoped to devices. There's kind of two forms of them. On the left-hand side, the image here is very much a simple blueprint, right? I enroll a device to that blueprint, I define everything in one space, and that declares everything that is in scope for all devices in that blueprint. Where we go a step further is that conditional logic, where we can use the assignment map module or the view to be able to create conditions to deploy to devices. So, hey, if something about the user or the device meets these conditions, then you're also included or excluded from certain configurations as well. From a foundational standpoint, we really care about pulling as much from the identity provider as possible. So user attributes from the IDP, group memberships and things like that. And that assignment maps model has given us real flexibility to be able to create those if, else if kind of pieces of logic and really give you flexibility in the environment. Where blueprint routing goes a step further is you can use that same logic and those same ideas, but we can do it during enrollment time. So now we don't have to wait for the device to land to then interrogate and decide what happens on the device. What we can do instead is we can define a set of rules using that same logic to say, hey, as the device is enrolling, let's figure out what it is. Let's figure out which scenario or persona that we're trying to solve for, and let's have it land in the appropriate blueprint that you see fit, right? There's a number of reasons that you might want to do that, but in this video, you can just see the setup of process here of, hey, if the asset tag contains something, drop in this blueprint. If the device family is an iPad, maybe a different blueprint is where you want it to land during the enrollment. And actually, there's a few key areas where that becomes really important. One is that you can now use a single automated device enrollment token in Apple Business Manager or Apple School Manager. We can set the default for all device families if your organization supports that and you use Iru for everything. And I can say, hey, Mac, iPad, iOS, all devices use one MDM server in ABM to sync to us. So there's no need for multiple ones and different default blueprints associated to either of them. We can also solve for different personas or scenarios. So maybe the device type has a bearing of where it should land, right? In this case, maybe I have corporate mobile devices in the form of iPhone. Maybe they need to land in a corporate mobile blueprint to just deploy things that we want to assign to business users or something like that, versus something like Zoom room controllers or sort of kiosk devices where there isn't a user assigned to them, but there's a different set of controls that I want to apply to them as well. Really, you could do that all in one blueprint. There's no right or wrong way of doing it, but it's nice to logically segregate those scopes and those configurations out into. And the final thing is, it's not just Apple. We've built blueprint routing and assignment rules to be ecosystem agnostic, right? We really want you to be able to use that same logical conditioning for every device that you manage with Iru, whether that be Apple, whether it be Android or Windows. And it's really important to be able to declare everything during provisioning, regardless of things just being a certain device type. So moving to Jim, I want Jim to just run you through a really quick demo of how you assembled it, but over to you, Jim.
Thanks, Ryan. Yep, today I'm just going to take you through a quick configuration for blueprint routing and kind of show you a real world example of where this can fall into place, right? Ryan said it's going to really round out our configuration capabilities and just open up more options. And that's really what we want, right? We want to give admins as many options as possible to get to their desired end state. So in your enrollment section of Eru, you'll see a new button for blueprint routing. Click on that, and that'll give you the configuration options. First thing you're always going to want to make sure you do is select an automated device enrollment library item that will be the default for blueprint routing. And in a little bit of a way, think of blueprint routing as a landing blueprint in itself, right? It is in your enrollment section. You can set it in your automated device enrollment configuration as the default, and you can use manual enrollment with a 6-digit code for blueprint routing as well. So it really sits above the rest of your blueprints, and then the same conditional logic that you use on the assignment map can be leveraged here. So we do always want to make sure that we set an automated device enrollment library item, because that's the library item that's going to be used on the devices that are assigned to blueprint routing. So for us, I'm going to choose our enterprise automated device enrollment, and then I'm going to start building out my conditions. So the first one I want is device family, because I have a blueprint in our environment that is specifically for our computers. That includes both Windows and Mac computers. All of those will be configured in a specific way. And so I want to make sure I target those as they enroll to assign them to that blueprint. So we're just going to select both of those platforms. And then we'll select the blueprint, which is going to be our enterprise, Mac OS, and Windows. Now, I also use corporate phones in our environment. So I want to make sure that, again, those device family types are going to the right blueprint. We separated them out in our environment specifically because we just like to control the configurations a little bit more granularly. Know when I look at this blueprint, I'm configuring iOS devices. When I look at this blueprint, I'm configuring computers. I'm going to add that condition here. Same thing, but now I'm going to select iPhone and Android. And I actually also want to add another condition, though. I do want to make sure that there are users assigned to these devices, that they go into this blueprint, since I have some rules in that assignment map that are going to base the assignment of applications or settings on users and groups. So what I'll do here is I'll actually include an additional rule for some group membership. And we definitely have our environment configured with some region groups. So I'm going to add EMEA. And then I'm going to add APAC. And the US.
I think it's
Americas.
Try to keep it continental.
Americas. Perfect. And then that will go into our mobile devices blueprint. Perfect. So now I've accounted for most of the scenarios in our environment, but there's one more I need to account for, which is kiosk devices. And those are used in some retail stores. So if none of the other conditions match, I want to make sure that any of the devices that I enroll in addition to this will go into that retail tablet devices, because those should be the only devices that I am configuring in my environment. So that's it. Now I can save blueprint routing. And now any devices that are assigned to the blueprint routing blueprint will enroll, and at enrollment time, these conditions will be evaluated just like on an assignment map, and my devices will land in the blueprints that they are supposed to. So again, just adding an additional option for flexibility. If you like to keep things separated out, maybe you like the more straightforward configuration of blueprints in the kind of without conditional logic. This now gives you the ability to apply that logic while keeping things straightforward. Perfect. Ryan, Maz, anything either of you would like to add?
Yeah, cool. Thanks for that, Jim. I guess one thing is you can see at the top here, we're setting one ADE library item for the blueprint route. Coming soon, very soon, you will be able to set multiple ADE library items for each of these options as well. So where that really matters is if you're requiring authentication during enrollment time, and you want that to happen maybe just with the Mac and the Windows devices, but maybe not the kiosk devices because they're userless, you'll be able to declare that certain devices are forced through that SAML or the SSO authentication during enrollment, and the rest or specific groups of devices are not. Cool. Hey Maz, what's the Q&A looking so far?
Yeah, we have a few questions. This first one from Thomas, I'll read it out loud. Thomas, I prefer using a single assignment map because the client machines are moving to different users a lot, which would require the client moving to another blueprint every time it passes along, assuming moving between users. Or is there is there still a good use using blueprint routing? Thomas, if you could clarify, I think what you're asking is, can we use blueprint routing to potentially move people between different blueprints after the device has to move along from maybe one person to another, from one use case to another?
Got you. If that is the case, then blueprint routing isn't necessarily the feature that you would leverage for that because it works during enrollment time rather than ongoing check-in. If you want to have users or devices jump between blueprints autonomously, you could have a conditional block in the assignment map for that blueprint, and you could execute a script to have the device move itself via the API. And depending on what logic that you're triggering with that, right? Maybe a group in Okta or an IDP is the scope for a different blueprint. Maybe a user is transitioning between parent and child businesses in the organization. In that, I guess just to add some extra flavor there, I think that's a really good case of where a single assignment map works really well because it's not necessarily the bucket that you want to put the device in, it's the actual ruling that you're associating to the user in the device. So having that just naturally change every time an event happens, like the inventory update happens or a change happens from the IDP, is a really good way to do it anyway without needing to move between blueprints.
Great. Thanks, Ryan. This one should be pretty easy. What is the best way to have devices be assigned to their users in an automated way prior to enrollment?
Yeah, absolutely. That's where automated device enrollment authentication comes in. That is the absolute best way to get a user assigned to a device at time of enrollment. So that's just an option in the automated device enrollment library item. We absolutely have documentation on that can help you get set up there, but that allows us to automatically assign a device to a user. Other than that, you would need to do it in the UI manually using the drop-down list on the pre-enrollment record. But with blueprint routing, as the device is enrolled, we do evaluate those rules. So you could build a blueprint routing rule that is based on an identity provider group, a department, any of that information that gets evaluated at the initial time of enrollment. So the device should land in the correct blueprint.
Thank you, Jim. A question, how do we confirm the blueprint routing is working? Is there any logs that we can associate with or look at to confirm?
Cool. Yeah, so the logs that we do generate are changes to the configuration. If Jim makes a change to the way that the if and else if statements are made, you get that logged and you can see that in the activity section of the platform. Really, the way that you test it for endpoints is enroll the device. Did it land in the correct spot? If not, you could potentially build remediation actions in that. A classic example there would be for macOS, have something running where we check to see if it's in the correct blueprint, and if not, we can bounce it somewhere else. But really, you shouldn't have to engineer that far.
And then Jay had a question, but it seems like he said, never mind, thanks for that answer. So I'll go ahead and mark it as answered. It was around the routing of a single ADE library item. Thank you, Jay. So another question is, so I'd have to enroll all devices again. Thomas, I'm assuming you're asking like in regards to routing in itself and using the router itself.
I think this is a follow-up question for the one that we answered earlier. You shouldn't, if you want to use blueprint routing again, then enrollment time is the only time that triggers. You shouldn't have to re-enroll devices to switch between blueprints. You can have devices autonomously do that via the API. And you'd be using the same conditional logic as well. So whatever choices you're making, is it macOS, is the user in this group in the identity provider, you can use in the assignment map naturally as well. So you don't have to re-enroll devices to trigger that action.
Perfect. And then a question from Christine, how does this work with ASM?
Assume that's Apple School Manager, which, yes, we tend to generalize and always use Apple Business Manager as the term that we use. Apple School Manager, Apple Business Manager, it will work the same with either of those. So basically, it's just Apple assigning the devices to us. After that, blueprint routing is just part of the enrollment process. So there's nothing special that needs to be done. You would just simply assign your devices to Eru in either Apple Business Manager or Apple School Manager.
Thank you, Jim. A question here, what's the expected time frame for ADE routing options? This is definitely the missing piece for us.
Yeah, I
Cool.
assume this is the follow-up for the multiple ADE library items for specific device types and things like that. I don't have a specific time frame that I can provide. Our team is actively working on it right now, so I expect it within the next few weeks.
For devices that were previously enrolled and assigned an assignment map, will these rules override that previous assignment?
So they won't be overridden necessarily, they just get reassociated and recalculated at enrollment time. If I didn't delete the device record and I re-enroll the device, we're going to effectively treat it as a new device enrollment and reassociate it based on which conditions it meets. Classic example there is if, let's say, a user leaves the business, we hand that device to a new user after erasing it. We don't delete the device record in Iru, but we re-enroll it. It will be treated as a new device and it will update the existing device record after it lands in whichever blueprint it's supposed to be in.
What happens if the ADE library item is set to none?
Great question. So the none basically means don't do anything special with the automated device enrollment record. Iru does always create a default automated device enrollment record for any devices that are assigned to our platform. So if it's assigned to us in Apple Business Manager, it's going to go through automated device enrollment. Now, beyond that, nothing else would change from a normal kind of consumer out of the box experience, right? After enrollment, they would go through all the normal setup assistant screens. They wouldn't be prompted for authentication or anything like that. It'd be just as if you took a normal Mac computer out of the box or an iOS device out of the box and set it up. It would just be enrolled in our platform. So the automated device enrollment library item specifically controls that initial experience, right? What screens does the user see or not see? Does it go through authentication? Are we going to create a user account on a Mac computer or skip that? Those are the kind of things that are taken into account with automated device enrollment, but even set to none, devices would still enroll into the Iru platform.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Can you use blueprint routing based on department the employee is located in?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the native attributes that we collect from the identity provider integration. Just to run through them again, it's job title, department, email address, and group membership off the top of my head. I don't think I'm missing any, but those are the naturally collected or ingested records. If you wanted to go a step further, that's where groups in the identity provider can give you even more flexibility. If location is something that you're after rather than the department that the user is in, it's likely that you've got groups in the IDP to represent that based on a value of an attribute. So in the case of me provisioning Jim in my identity provider, I might have a location field and I might set Jim to US, and then I can ingest that in via group membership instead. In fact, just to add to that, sorry, in the example Jim gave you, he showed you the groups of EMEA, Americas, and APAC. That's a really good example of where it's really used.
Perfect. And I'll stay with you on this one, Ryan, because I think it's a follow-up to one of the questions you answered. If the device record is deleted, will that still be okay?
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't necessarily matter to us. In theory, it's always nice to clean up and remove devices if they're stagnant and no longer managed, as long as you've kept those secrets from before or if you've removed them because you don't need them.
Awesome. Thank you. This is a really good question. How does blueprint routing feature works with manual enrollment devices?
Great question. And yes, like I said, think of blueprint routing almost like a blueprint in itself, because there is an enrollment record for it and there is a manual enrollment 6-digit code for it as well. So it would work the same way that automated device enrollment does. It's simply you would go to the enrollment URL, you would enter the 6-digit code for the blueprint routing enrollment profile, and then the user would follow the standard steps of downloading the profile, installing it, and then at that time, the device would then be routed to the appropriate blueprint based on the rules that you've defined.
Perfect. Thanks, Jim. I set up the blueprint routing, set it based on Mac Family, Mac Mini, but did not enable the ADE library. I noticed that the Mac Mini was enrolled to our usual blueprint instead of the ones for Mac Mini.
Got you. I think the first place I'd check is check to see that you've not overridden the enrollment in the enrollment part of the Iru instance. The blueprint root is treat it as like the default blueprint that you assign to a device. If in the enrollment section under ADE, you've set a different blueprint, that will always take precedent over the blueprint route that you've set.
Yeah, that's a fantastic call out, Ryan. Just to clarify, I keep saying it, treat blueprint routing as a blueprint. So just like with manual enrollment, you would use the 6-digit code for the blueprint. You do need to make sure that you update your automated device enrollment assignment to use blueprint routing, as well as if you do have existing devices that are awaiting enrollment, you would need to change those to blueprint routing instead of whatever the old default blueprint was. Because once a device is assigned in the awaiting enrollment section, changing the default in your automated device enrollment configuration doesn't update those existing pre-enrollment records.
Perfect. Thank you. Can Eru work directly with vendors to have our company blueprints pushed out as an out-of-the-box experience whenever machines are purchased?
Got you. So if I'm understanding this correctly, this is more a case of, hey, how can I deploy devices out of the box straight from a reseller or the point of procurement, right? We wouldn't necessarily work directly with the reseller or whoever you purchase devices from. You would have them synced to us through something like Apple Business Manager, and then we can have the device enroll into the platform straight out of the box. And you can then, as the administrator, define what happens to the device, right? Which blueprint it lands in, which library items to scope to the device or the users that are associated to it, etc. It's all about connecting your Eru tenant with something like Apple Business Manager, Apple School Manager, and in the future, the same kind of concept that will apply to the Windows space as well.
Perfect. With manual enrollment, can you stop users from deleting the profile?
Jim, do you want to take that one?
I could take that one. The short answer is not really. A manually installed profile is always technically removable. Now, as of now, unless something changed that I am forgetting in Tahoe, if they are an administrator, they can remove the profile. That is an Apple-defined setting. There's nothing that MDM can do currently to prevent an admin user from removing a manually installed MDM profile.
Yeah, there are ways of obscuring it, but I think Apple marked the profile method as deprecated, so I wouldn't rely on it for too long. And again, if the user is an administrator, they can actually use the command line tool to remove it. Typically, we'd always recommend trying to get those devices in Apple Business Manager or Apple School Manager, just to give yourself that, the peace of mind that it's enrolled via ADE and it's locked in place and protected by system integrity protection, and B, if it goes missing, if it gets lost or stolen, it's just going to either enroll back into the platform so that you've got observability and visibility over it again, or it's going to guard and prevent the user from using the device because it's going to be stuck at the require authentication screen.
All right. Would it be possible to use blueprint routing to automatically add a device tag in the future?
That is a really good feature request. You can pre-assign tags either via the GUI or the API pre-enrollment, but if you wanted to trigger a device tag creation at the point of enrollment by something like blueprint routing, that would be a really cool thing for us to do in the future. If you haven't already, submit it, and hopefully we'll get to that at some point.
Yeah, and just really quick, as far as feature feedback, if you click on your name on the bottom left corner, you go to organization under resources tab, there is a feature request section there. We'd love to hear from you. Which criteria of blueprint routing are different from those of assignment maps? And then second question behind it, which conditions best have the blueprint routing level and which on assignment map level?
So
Conditions? Oh, go ahead, Ryan.
yeah, so the conditions are all identical. So you can use the exact same conditions pre-enrollment and post-enrollment as far as we're concerned from the assignment maps and the conditional logic is concerned. The enrollment time makes a difference. Is it something that I want to interrogate during enrollment so that it lands somewhere different? That's what blueprint routing is for. Regardless of where it lands, all of those conditions can then be continuously assessed on every change or any device check in there as well. Cool. I think that's the end of all the questions we've got and the time that we've got. But if anything does come up, as soon as we leave this session, if you go, I should have asked this, we're always available. Speak to the support team or your customer success manager, or even one of us if you're talking to one of us directly anyway. But great to have you here. I really appreciate your time. And from all of us, thanks for joining and see you on the next one.
Cheers, everybody. Have an
Thanks,
amazing
everyone.
day.